the rhetoric around this whole Roe v. Wade ruling really annoys me because it seems like much of what I see and I witness is either very dishonest or very ignorant, not understanding what is going on around it. And now, I am not saying this as some person who is really super knowledgeable in all the intricacies of American law and the legal system and knows everything about morality and I have the perfect answers. That's not even the direction I'm going in. I'm just talking about plain the facts of the matter, plainly to do with what is factual in and around the situation. And especially when I look sometimes locally here in Trinidad or some of the regional posts from people in the Caribbean and the regular Caribbean, Twitter, verse, etc. It's like, if you want to comment on it, if you have a view on it, at least take the time to understand the facts around what you would like to formulate your view on. It really annoys me in the first place when I see in Trinidad and Tobago, in the Caribbean, in the wider region, it seems so often like when we're interacting with American politics, we only have the Hollywood view of it. You know, the good guy, bad guy, the good guys are the liberal side and that left-wing side, they are all the good guys and those evil racist conservatives. And that's a Hollywood version of politics. I mean, if we look back in our own countries and think of the two main parties we have in our countries, and we think of it realistically, it never is really separated on that kind of simplistic of a ground. And it seems so often like we buy wholesale into that. And the real irony of it to me is that it seems when you analyze the actual beliefs and the actual political ideologies of a lot of people and social ideologies, much of the Caribbean is actually very conservative, probably even on the more extreme side. So it seems all kind of ironic to me, but so be it. In this case, I think I'm going to try to see some of the things that annoy me about this whole discussion and maybe even get into a little of the discussion itself, but it's more to do with the facts around the matter. Before we get deeper into that, hit that like button. And if you like this kind of content and you'd like to see more of it, hit that like button, drop a comment, tell me what you think. I know this topic is one that many people are interested in, so drop a comment, tell me if you think I'm wrong about something, or if you know something that I say to be factual to actually not be factual and I'm spreading false news. Well, you tell me such in the comments. Subscribe if you are not yet subscribed, and share this to someone. Strike up a conversation with it. Who knows? All right. So first off, I think to understand this, you need to understand some of the American political system, how the United States is run in the first place. They have a unique political system, and it's engineered in a way that you could have seen the founding fathers, as they call them. You could have seen that these men were trying to figure out solutions to certain problems. So they have a Congress where you, according to the population of a place, you divide it into districts, and each district has a Congress member who goes up to the capital and represents them. That's where the laws are made. So in a sense, every individual votes for a representative who gets to make the laws of the land. And then on top of that, so that's the democratic representative there in their Congress. Then they have a Senate, which is designed to be, as it were, a council of elders, because direct democracy gets to be mob rule very quickly, and maybe we could discuss that sometime, but mob rule isn't exactly an ideal. So you have that council of elders to, you know, even it out, and the council of elders, 2 from each state. So it's a representative of each individual state, and the nature of their states is that each state is supposed to have some kind of self-governance, because each individual state also has their own Congress and their own Senate, and they have, as it were, 50 individual little experiments there that they can look at and say, all right, we see how each different one runs, and we send up our council of elders into the Senate. And then on top of all of that, they have an executive arm, because if you go to war and such kind of decisions on a countrywide basis, you need someone to actually make the decision quickly. You don't want to go through 300 and something Congress members to make that decision. You need such executive decisions to happen quickly. So you have those multiple arms trying to act there, in a sense independent of each other, to run a more balanced country. And then on top well, not on top, but separate from all of that, they have their Supreme Court, which is their highest court in their land. And that would be appointed in a mixture of the president and the Senate. It has to pass the Senate. And their justices go up there and they're appointed to that position. They are not voted there. They are appointed there by the senators. And the idea is that these people should know the law so well that any law that goes all the way through the lower courts and right up to the top, they can decide if it lines up with the Constitution. Now, where Roe v. Wade comes in is that previously, the Supreme Court decided that abortion cannot be restricted before a certain stage. And that was the Roe v. Wade law. But here's the thing. That was decided by judges. Judges, the justices of the Supreme Court back in the 60s, was it? Decided that we decide there is this provision in the Constitution, and they found it in their Constitution in something that was not actually in the Constitution. A right to privacy between the doctor and the mother, which does not actually line up with abortion. It is not something in the Constitution. Now, here's the thing. According to their law books, if something is not directly in the Constitution, then it is left up to the state or the legislature to decide it. Those members in Congress can carry any law they want to Congress and get it passed. They can get abortion passed in Congress. Now, what the Supreme Court did now is they said, we in the Supreme Court, we the justices say, it is not on us to say whether abortion should be legal or not. It is on the state because that is not in our original Constitution. It is on each state to make their own law. In other words, it goes back to the people, you know, because the people vote for their representatives and their representatives make their laws. So it goes back to them to decide instead of forcing it from some justices who say this shall be the law of the land. So to me, this is what I find kind of confusing when I see some of the rhetoric around this whole Roe v. Wade business. Because if you're saying that some random men, especially white men, should not have the ability to make the decision on someone else's body, on someone else's behalf. Each person, this should be up to a democratic vote. We cannot damage democracy and let these people send these edicts over other people. Well, then that is kind of the whole thing the Supreme Court just did. Previously, by the way, it was previously all men, all white men, decided that all of the country, their country, is going to live by this law. Now they're saying, well, it's not up to these few members of a justice panel. No, it's up to the legislature. If you think this should be part of our law, if you think this is what the people want, then let the people go about it the legislative way, the democratic way, and petition your representatives to take a law into the Congress and let it pass. You see, that way you end up with what the majority of the people in an area want, and that would be the law. That makes actually more democratic sense to me. So I don't understand people who are fighting this on some kind of democratic grounds, like you're disobeying the voice of the people. This seems like it lines up with putting it into the realm of the voice of the people. Now, on the other hand, if you're saying that it's not a matter of whether it is in the realm of the voice of the people, it's a matter of right and wrong. And my body, my choice, no one has a right to see what someone else does with their body. Then what you are actually making is a moral argument. That's not a legislative argument. And in that case, you have to win the moral argument. You have to actually have that moral argument and win it. And many people are not having that argument and they are not winning it. They are just coming up with the assumption that this is the way it should go, my body, my choice, forget about everything else, and that's the way it should go. But that's not how you get things done. You have to actually convince people of your view. Other than that, you get it done through the legislative branch. If you can convince enough people of your view and get them to vote for someone who would subscribe to your view, you would get it passed in a democratic fashion. If you're saying it is the moral thing and it's a moral issue, then win the moral argument. And I think this is part of the problem with modern morality in and of itself. Modern morality, we've thrown away religion. Much of the world has thrown away religion. Many of the main religions in the world, what they're losing people to isn't another religion. They're losing people to being irreligious. No religion. They've thrown away religion. So now many people have a morality based on the facts, based on the science. And the problem with that is when your morality was based on religion, that's something that has existed in humanity for ages now. We have the understanding that some people have a different view of morality, and maybe we could try to convince them, but we have the understanding theirs is different. When your morality is now based on facts and science, then any person not aligning with that is dead wrong. I have no room to be wrong because I am based on the facts of the matter. While in reality, sometimes it's not actually that factual. And because it is thought of as now being grounded on something beside some old religion, we are now grounded on facts, no one can question it. Well, a lot of the times it actually can be questioned. And sometimes, so many people I notice in these kinds of arguments have argued so often in a bubble where they don't even understand they are actually reasonable arguments against what you're saying. So to me, the argument of my body, my choice, I don't think that is relevant in where the main problems are in this argument. I don't think many people debate the my body, my choice argument, as we saw back with the vaccine, etc. The actual problem that people are having, where I think the whole crux of this issue lies, is in where human life begins. It's in the value of human life. And you could say my body, my choice until you're blue in the face. What someone else is saying on the other side is that there's another body here that in the equation that isn't your body. And if you take a human life, that is murder, and we have already determined in our morality that murder is wrong. So what you're trying to convince someone of here is that in this case, it's not a human life, or in this case, it's not murder. It's one out of the two you're trying to convince them of. And I think there's a lot of dishonesty here, because in trying to convince people of one way or the other, many people are dishonest about it, to put it bluntly. There's no question to me about where life starts. And the first article I'm going to pull up here was an essay written by a strong feminist, Naomi Wolf, back in the early 90s. She was pro-choice. But I found her argument, and this is 1995, this essay was. I found her argument to be more honest. She was attempting to point out that, yes, it is indeed another life, and the argument she's trying to go with is that nonetheless, although it is another life, the woman's life takes more importance, which is quite an argument to go with, but I think it's more honest. Let's take a read of this. Our Bodies, Our Souls by Naomi Wolf. I had an abortion when I was a single mother and my daughter was 2 years old. I would do it again. But you know how in the Greek myths, when you kill a relative, you are pursued by furies? For months, it was as if baby furies were pursuing me. These are not the words of a benighted, superstition-ridden teenager lost in America's cultural backwaters. They are the words of a Cornell-educated, urban-dwelling, Democrat-voting 40-year-old cardiologist. I'll call her Claire. Claire is exactly the kind of person for whom being pro-choice is an unshakable conviction. If there were a core constituent for the movement to secure abortion rights, Claire would be it. And yet, her words are exactly the words to which the pro-choice movement is not listening. Now, bear in mind, when I'm reading this article is from 1995. And listen how accurate it seems to point to the reality now. At its best, feminism defends its moral high ground by being simply faithful to the truth, the woman's real life experiences. But to its own ethical and political detriment, the pro-choice movement has relinquished the moral frame around the issue of abortion. It has ceded the language of right and wrong to abortion foes. The movement's abandonment of what Americans have always and rightly demanded of their movements, an ethical core, and its reliance instead on a political rhetoric in which the fetus means nothing, are proving fatal. This is 1995. The effects of this abandonment can be measured in two ways. First of all, such a position causes us to lose political ground. By refusing to look at abortion within a moral framework, we lose the millions of Americans who want to support abortion as a legal right, but still need to condemn it as a moral iniquity. Their ethical allegiances are then addressed by the pro-life movement, which is willing to speak about good and evil. The general idea she summed up as this: in the following pages, I will argue for a radical shift in the pro-choice movement's rhetoric and consciousness about abortion. I will maintain that we need to contextualize the fight to defend abortion rights within a moral framework that admits that the death of a fetus is a real death, that there are degrees of culpability, judgment, and responsibility involved in the decision to abort a pregnancy, that the best understanding of feminism involves holding women as well as men to the responsibilities that are inseparable from their rights, and that we need to be strong enough to acknowledge that this country's high rate of abortion, which ends more than a quarter of all pregnancies, can only be rightly understood as what Dr. Henry Foster was bringing it a failure. Now, this way back in 1995, from what anyone would call even back then a radical feminist, was trying to see that by the movement attempting to remove the humanity of a fetus, they're going to lose the battle. She went on through the article to point out why this battle was being lost, because more and more as time progressed, more and more since Roe v. Wade was announced, the Roe, Jane Roe, was the pseudonym they gave to the anonymous person that came forward with the abortion claim and the abortion lawsuit. The person, the actual person who became known after a while behind Jane Roe, eventually herself came around to be anti-abortion. When you have things like that happening, you're losing the argument. And then as more technology progressed, we have 3D scans of unborn babies now. We have 3D scans of ultrasounds now. You can actually see, yes, this person has a face, this person has a limbs, this person is a human being just inside of the belly. And what many of the very pro-abortion people attempted to do was they attempted to gaslight the world really and truly by saying that is not a real human, that is a fetus, and trying to make that distinction that is really and truly murky. There's another article I have pulled up here, which was a left-wing atheist's case against abortion. And I have this because many people already fully understand the religious cases against abortion, so I'm not even attempting to make that. If you understand that, fine. But there is even more cases than that. And what I'm attempting to show is that by people keeping pushing further and further down the line on this abortion business and then being dishonest about what they're talking about, they lost even some of the most original, fervent supporters of abortion. This was written by Christopher Hitchens. This was an interview with Christopher Hitchens, one of the most famed atheists out there in the last probably century. And his argument was very similar. You cannot deny a fetus is a life. If you were to attempt to define human life, you would say that it is a continuum that begins at conception and ends at death. There's no other reasonable scientific logical point to start it or end it. That's where it is at. And anything else leaves the space open for the whole host of brutality to happen. So when you hear people talking about, well, there are many poor women who would suffer with this, and there are people who would have had children with disabilities, you're understanding that people who are making these arguments are not understanding the other side. The other side is saying that, yes, those are people with disabilities, those are poor people. And if you're saying that a poor unborn child, who they're calling a person, is not worthy of being allowed to live, you understand the connotation of that, as if a poor person has less of a right to live, or someone who has a disability has less of a right to live. If you are calling these fetuses seeing them as part of the continuous progress of human life. You are saying that if a human life is born in a situation of poverty, then someone who has authority over it has more right to kill it. That's not a reasonable argument to make, at least not to someone who's saying that human life has sanctity. Now, if we go back to Miss Naomi Wolf back in 1995, her reasoning behind abortion, and you could tell me if this makes sense to you, her reasoning that she chose to say, yes, we are killing a life, but it is worthy, is a comparison between abortion and war. Similarly, many people support necessary acts of warfare. There are legal mechanisms that allow us to bring into the world the evil of war. But imagine how quickly public opinion would turn against the president who waged war while asserting that our sons and daughters were nothing but cannon fodder. Grief and respect are the proper tones for all discussions about choosing to endanger or destroy a manifestation of life. I think that is a very interesting perspective to put forward. The perspective that this is similar to war. Many countries legally can vote to go to war. And war inevitably, not inevitably, but usually leads to death. Death of your fellow citizens, death of whoever the enemies may be. And in that case, those deaths are seen as legal. So the argument she's making there is that abortion can be seen similarly as a legal death, although nonetheless being a death and being recognized as such and even being mourned as such. Now, I don't think many people will be okay with that, because that's like conflating in our mind, sending babies out to war and allowing them to die while saying, yes, they are babies and we understand that, but we say it's okay to die. Well, I mean, the general reasoning is war is done for survival. That's the reasoning they see. War is a matter of survival. So you'd say that the only way you can try and justify that is as a matter of survival. And many pro-life people would willingly say that if a pregnancy jeopardizes the life of the mother, well, yeah, that's okay. But if you're talking just about economic conditions or convenience, that's hard to try and justify as the level of war for killing a child. But nonetheless, I can give this points for being more honest. It's way more honest than the people that attempt to say a fetus is a fetus, it's not yet alive. That is an unreasonable, unrealistic, unscientific statement. Now, along this tone, to me, what was one of the most reasonable arguments I've previously heard for abortion, while admitting the scientific and logical realities, was the proposition of the violinist. You could use nearly any valuable person. And the idea is that if you wake up sometimes, someone drugged you, put you to sleep, you wake up attached to a blood transfusion machine or some kind of machine, attaching you to a world-class violinist, some kind of world-class someone on another bed, and you are attached to them, and their friends tell you that they're in a life-threatening stage and you need to remain attached to them for 9 months in order for them to live. And then after the 9 months, you could get off and go your way and you'll be fine. But you must remain attached to them for 9 months. Do you then have the right to detach yourself from this machine that is keeping this person alive, knowing that if you detach yourself from this machine, the other person dies? Well, I could understand that argument. I could understand the kind of reasonability, at least the seeming reasonability in that argument, that you didn't put yourself in a situation. You are forced into a situation where someone is taking out of your life essence and they need that to survive. Yes, but then it shouldn't be on you to be forced to allow this person to live. However, in the first place, when you're talking about a pregnancy, you're not talking about a stranger. You're talking about literally your child. So the argument is, if you wake up with your child attached to you, would you say that they should remain attached to you? are right. And even in that case, if you wake up there against your will, you could understand a logical reason. Even though it's your child, you're like, well, sorry, son, I didn't mean to be here. So you could understand that. It's very callous, but you could understand that. However, the further part in this situation that really frustrates me with the abortion arguments is that we in 2022 AD are acting like we are in 2022 BC, back in the Egyptian kingdom, where we don't understand how pregnancy happens and how to avoid it. The case here isn't like your child becomes attached to you by mistake. You oops and wake up here. It's an action that has a consequence, and that's part of the argument that people are making. If you go into your yard, and continuously plant a seed in your backyard, you repeatedly plant seeds at different spots in your backyard, and then trees pop up, and you say that you must cut the trees because you don't want a forest growing in your backyard, isn't it reasonable for someone to say that what you should be doing is not planting the seed instead of attempting to cut down the trees? And now, if we are saying that cutting down the trees is something that is morally reprehensible, it isn't a moral good thing for you to cut down the trees, shouldn't we stop you from planting the seeds? And it doesn't seem logically even to say that, okay, I cannot help myself but plant the seeds, so no one has a right to tell me don't cut down the trees. I don't understand that logical argument. Feel free to make it in the comments for me and try and convince me of that. Make another video and reply to this if you can convince me of that. It just does not seem reasonable to me. And to me, a lot of, for example, what I've said during the extent of this video, when I see people respond to it and speak about it online, in different debates, a lot of dishonesty and ignorance goes on around it. But you drop a comment and tell me what you think around this very sensitive topic. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. And I don't know if you could hear the rain pouring down. I hope that although the rain came down in the last few minutes there, I hope that the audio was still on point. And I will see you later.